Emily Carter had always loved the view from the roof of the Wexler Financial Tower. From up there, Chicago felt like a living constellation, every window a tiny star, every street a glowing river of motion. But that night, something in the air felt wrong the instant she pushed through the rooftop door. The wind wasn't natural, too warm, too focused, like a slow inhale from something enormous just above the cloud line. She took a cautious step onto the concrete, letting the metal door swing shut behind her. For a moment, all she heard was her own breath and the faint hum of the antenna system. Then her phone vibrated in her jacket. One single notification glowed on the screen. A message from no number, from no app she recognized. Just two words, "Look up." She didn't want to. Everything in her body told her not to. But curiosity, dread, and something deeper, something she couldn't name, pulled her chin upward. At first, she thought she was seeing a storm front rolling in from the lake, but the shape wasn't moving like clouds. Instead, the sky seemed to be folding in on itself, like a dark sheet being pinched from the center. The clouds twisted around a growing white slit of light, and the moment Emily recognized it wasn't weather, the wind stopped completely. It was so sudden it made her stumble. The city sounds below vanished into a vacuum silence. No cars, no horns, no aircraft. Chicago froze. Emily whispered, "What is happening?" But her voice felt like it was being swallowed before the sound left her lips. The white slit widened, and the rooftop beneath her vibrated with a deep, bone-rattling hum. She backed away, her heartbeat thundering in her ears, but her feet felt heavier with every step, as if the air itself was thickening. A figure appeared inside the tier. At first, it was only a shadow drifting downward, slowly defining itself into a long, humanoid shape, limbs too smooth, movements too precise. A silhouette that looked human only in the way a sculpture might, similar but wrong in the tiny details. As it descended, its surface reflected the city lights like polished obsidian. But the reflections moved independently, sliding, rearranging, forming symbols she didn't understand. It was alive. It was watching her. Emily raised both hands. "Stay away, I don't know what you want." The being's head tilted with slow curiosity, and suddenly she felt pressure deep in her mind, like a cold hand touching her thoughts from the inside. A voice, not heard but injected, echoed through her skull. "You already know why we are here." Emily shook her head violently. "No, I don't. I don't know anything, please." The ground beneath her feet lit up with a thin circle of blue-white light. The air inside the circle grew heavy and warm, vibrating with invisible threads that crawled up her body. She tried to step out of it, but her legs refused to move. It was as if the light had weight. The being drifted closer until she could see her own reflection stretched across its surface, her face twisted in fear, her eyes shimmering with tears under the harsh glare. The voice pressed deeper into her mind. "3 nights we called. Tonight you answered." Emily screamed, "I didn't answer anything. I don't know what you are." But the being didn't react to her panic. Instead, the light surged upward, wrapping around her waist like invisible arms lifting her from the ground. Her shoes scraped against the rooftop as she rose higher, her fingers clawing at empty air. She kicked, twisted, fought, but each movement became slower, weaker, as if her strength was being siphoned away. The being moved beneath her, aligning itself directly under her suspended body. Its surface rippled once, like liquid metal disturbed by a drop of water. The tear in the sky widened further, blinding white edges peeling back to reveal a depth impossible to comprehend. It wasn't space. It wasn't sky. It was something else entirely, like staring into the inside of a star. Emily's voice cracked as she cried out, "Please don't take me, please." The voice returned, colder this time, more absolute. "You are already taken." The light snapped upward like a tether, pulling her violently toward the opening above. The wind returned in a single explosive gust, spiraling upward as if the entire atmosphere was being sucked into the fold. Her scream disintegrated into static. Her hair whipped around her face. Her arms reached downward in one last desperate attempt to grab the railing, but her fingers closed around nothing. Just inches from the tier, her body froze in midair. Her eyes widened as she stared into the impossible brightness. For a moment she wasn't terrified. She felt known, as if something behind the light had been waiting for her longer than her own lifetime. Then she vanished. The tear sealed shut with a sound like a distant thunderclap. The rooftop lights flickered back on. The city noise returned all at once, and the Wexler Financial Tower stood silent beneath the calm, indifferent night sky, holding no trace that Emily Carter had ever been there at all. The rain hadn't stopped for hours, turning the highway into a reflective black ribbon stretching across rural Ohio. Sarah Whitman kept both hands on the wheel, knuckles pale, eyes burning from the long drive. She wasn't supposed to be out here this late. She wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the old Silver Pines motel, the place she swore she would never return to. But fate, or something far colder, had been pushing her back toward it all week. The same dream every night, the same voice whispering her name from the end of a hallway she hadn't walked through in over a decade. Tonight she couldn't take it anymore. She needed answers, no matter how much she feared what she might find. The motel appeared through the fog like a fading memory, washed-out neon peeling paint, the sign flickering silver pin S where the E had long ago died. She pulled into the empty lot. No other cars, no staff in sight. Only the steady rhythm of the rain tapping on the hood. Sarah stepped out, shivering at the sharp cold. The air smelled like wet asphalt and old pine. A memory flashed, her mother's hand squeezing hers, guiding her down this very hallway after the accident. Her mother's voice saying, "Don't look back, sweetheart." She'd been 9. She'd always assumed her mom was talking about the past. Now she wasn't so sure. She walked toward the lobby door, but the moment she reached for the handle, it swung open on its own. No breeze, no draft, just the door moving as if someone on the other side had been waiting. Sarah hesitated, her breath coming out in a thin white cloud. Inside, the lobby was dark except for one flickering lamp behind the abandoned front desk. The old bell sat at the counter, tarnished and dusty. She touched it, and the moment her fingertip brushed the metal, it rang. Loud, too loud. The sound echoed down the motel hallway like someone had struck a massive tuning fork. Sarah's stomach twisted. Something about that sound didn't feel mechanical, it felt intentional. She stepped into the hallway, the carpet soft and damp under her shoes. Room numbers lined the doors in crooked brass plates, some missing, some hanging by a single nail. As she walked deeper, the lights above her buzzed with an electric tension that made her skin prickle. The air grew warmer, heavier, almost humid. She heard it then, a soft whisper of movement behind her. She spun around, heart pounding, but the hallway was empty. She forced herself to keep moving. Her dream, the hallway, the door at the end, the voice, always led her to room 19. And as she approached it now, she felt that same magnetic pull drawing her forward. Room 19 door was slightly ajar. A thin line of darkness seeped from the gap, somehow darker than the hallway itself. The doorknob was warm, too warm, as if a living hand had just pressed against it. Sarah swallowed hard and pushed the door open. What she saw made her breath hitch. The room hadn't been used in years, but everything was perfectly preserved. The bed made, the curtains drawn, the nightstand lamp still on, casting a soft golden glow. And there, standing in the middle of the room with her back turned, was a woman. Sarah froze. She knew that silhouette, the straight posture, the way the woman's hair fell over her shoulders, the white blouse, the black skirt. It was her mother's outfit from the night she disappeared. "Mom," Sarah whispered, voice trembling. The woman didn't move. Sarah took a step forward. "Mom, are you?" The figure inhaled sharply. The sound was wrong, too deep, too loud, like air being pulled into a hollow body. Then the woman turned. It wasn't her mother. The face was close enough, same eyes, same lips, same familiar sadness. But the eyes were too wide, the pupils too large, the expression too fixed. A perfect copy with the humanity scraped out. Sarah stumbled backward, pressing her spine against the doorframe. The not mother tilted her head slowly, mechanically, like a puppet learning how joints worked. Then it stepped toward her with a soft, wet sound, feet gliding across the carpet without lifting. Sarah tried to run, but the door behind her slammed shut, sealing her inside the room with the imitation. Her heart hammered. "What are you?" she cried. The copy blinked once, too slow, too deliberate. Then its jaw unhinged slightly, not enough to be monstrous, but enough to be wrong. A voice came out, not her mother's voice, but a layered chorus of whispers speaking in harmony from inside the hollow shape. "You were called back." Sarah shook her head violently. "No, no, I don't belong here. I left this place. I left it behind." The creature stepped closer. The whispers grew louder. The air in the room vibrated like a held breath on the verge of snapping. "You cannot leave what remembers you." The lamp flickered. The walls pulsed, almost breathing. The air felt thick and electric, pulling at her skin. The creature reached out an arm, and its hand, too long, too pale, touched her cheek. Sarah gasped as a surge of cold spread through her face, freezing her tears mid-fall. Then the creature leaned close, its face inches from hers, whispering in a voice made of layered echoes that crawled straight into her mind. We were waiting in the hallway. The room exploded with white light, and Sarah Whitman was gone. The door to room 19 swung open gently a moment later, letting the soft glow spill into the empty hallway once more. Behind it, the room returned to perfect stillness. Bed made, lamp on, curtains drawn, waiting patiently for the next person it remembered. The storm had rolled across northern Arizona with no warning, no clouds on the radar, no alerts, no reason for the sky to suddenly crack open with sheets of lightning that clawed across the desert like living things. Inside her small Airstream trailer parked near the edge of a dried-out canyon, Julia Mason tightened her robe around her and turned up the tiny space heater. She'd planned this weekend as a quiet, solitary escape from the chaos of Phoenix. No noise, no people, just silence, nature, and the hum of the desert. Instead, she got a storm that felt like it was trying to pry the earth open. Thunder shook the cabinets, rattling the mugs, and Julia reached for the radio on the counter, hoping for some weather report, anything that explained what was happening. She turned the knob, static, more static, a low hum, a garbled voice. Then suddenly a single frequency cut through loud and clear as if it were waiting for her. "Julie." Her finger froze on the dial. Nobody knew she was out here. Her service was dead. She hadn't told anyone the exact location, and the closest town was miles away. She leaned closer to the speaker. "Hello, who is this?" The radio hissed softly like it was breathing. "Julia Mason." Her stomach twisted. The voice wasn't distorted. It wasn't robotic. It was calm, deliberate, familiar in the way a dream is familiar. "How do you know my name?" she whispered. Lightning cracked outside, lighting the entire trailer in a ghostly blue pulse. The radio clicked and the voice returned, stronger this time, smooth and unsettlingly warm. "You hear us now. That is enough." Julia stepped back. The storm outside intensified, the wind shoving against the metal walls, making them groan like the trailer was alive and in pain. She unplugged the radio, but the voice kept talking. The radio wasn't on. It was impossible, but the speaker still glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Do not leave." Julia grabbed her coat and keys. The air inside the trailer suddenly felt too thick to breathe, like the atmosphere had become syrup, pulling her down, forcing her to stay. She stumbled to the door, but when she pulled the latch, it wouldn't move. The metal was ice cold beneath her hands, colder than the storm outside. A gust of wind slammed the trailer, and the lights flickered violently. Behind her, the radio speaker crackled. "You were chosen to answer." Her pulse hammered in her throat. "Chosen for what?" She shouted, her voice shaking, half anger, half terror. The speaker hummed and the voice changed. It layered, multiplied, dozens of tones speaking in perfect unison. "To receive." The lights went out. Julia froze. The darkness inside the trailer became absolute, so dense she couldn't see her own hands. She heard the faint sound of objects sliding across the counter, silverware shifting, the heater clicking as if something brushed past it. Then a soft tapping on the metal siding. Tap, tap, tap like fingertips, moving from one end of the trailer to the other, slow, searching. Her breath hitched. She crouched behind the small dining booth, heart pounding so loud she could hear it in her ears. The radio speaker sparked once, casting a tiny flicker of orange light across the room, and in that fraction of a second she saw a shadow standing in the doorway's outline. A tall silhouette, slender, perfectly still. Julia covered her mouth with both hands, stifling a sob. The radio glowed brighter, illuminating more of the trailer. The shadow didn't have a face, or maybe it did, but it wasn't one she could comprehend. Smooth surface, no eyes, no mouth, only the suggestion of a head shaped wrong, too elongated, too symmetrical, too deliberate. The voice returned, but this time it wasn't coming from the radio. It came from the shadow. "Do not fear what listens." Julia scrambled backward, knocking over a pot. The trailer rocked slightly as thunder exploded overhead. She grabbed a kitchen knife, gripping it with shaking fingers. "Stay back," she screamed. The shadow stepped inside. The air in the trailer collapsed inward, like all the oxygen had been sucked out. Julia gasped for breath, clutching her throat. Her vision blurred around the edges, stars and colors swirling as if her consciousness was being pulled through a funnel. The shadow leaned closer, its head tilting with an eerie curiosity. "You answered the static. Now we answer you." Julia's body lifted off the ground, weightless, suspended as if invisible hands were raising her toward the ceiling. The metal walls groaned again, this time from pressure, not wind. Objects floated, her keys, her coat, the knife twisting slowly in midair. Julia reached toward the door, her fingers stretching desperately for the latch, but the trailer dissolved into white light. Outside, the storm abruptly stopped. The canyon was silent. The airstream door swung open gently, tapping against the frame in the soft breeze. Inside, the trailer was empty, everything perfectly still. The radio sat on the counter, unplugged, dark, lifeless. But its speaker held one faint, fading whisper, like the last exhale of something that had waited a very long time. Received. Natalie Rhodes had driven the same wooded highway outside Portland 100 times. The old two-lane road curved through miles of pine, lifting and dropping with the terrain like a slow, steady breath. She always loved that stretch, quiet, empty, peaceful. But on this particular night, nothing felt familiar the moment her headlights swept across the trees. The forest looked darker, thicker, almost too still. Not even a breeze brushed the branches. The usual roadside fog was gone. No cars, no wildlife, just a strange, unnatural silence that settled heavily over everything. She glanced at the clock. 1:14 a.m. "Just get home," she whispered to herself, tapping the steering wheel to stay awake. But then her radio, which she always kept off at night, crackled to life. Not music, not voices. Just a deep, low-frequency vibration that sent a chill down her spine. She reached to turn it off, but the dial didn't respond. The hum grew louder, low, steady, like something large breathing from inside the speakers. "What the hell?" she muttered. That's when she saw the woman standing in the middle of the road. Natalie slammed the brakes. Tires screeched. The car fishtailed before stopping just inches from the figure. Her breath shook as she leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. The woman wasn't moving. She wore a long, old-fashioned nightgown that fluttered slightly even though there was no wind. Her hair hung soaked and heavy down her back, dripping like she'd just stepped out of deep water. Natalie reached for the door handle on instinct to help, to ask if she was okay, but something in her gut screamed, "Don't." Still, she opened the door. The forest air hit her skin like ice, cold enough to feel sharp. She stepped out slowly, feet crunching on gravel. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" she called. No answer. As Natalie got closer, she realized the woman's nightgown wasn't wet from water. It was covered in a thin sheen of mist, shimmering lightly like it wasn't part of the physical world. Natalie's stomach dropped. Her breath hung in the air even though the night wasn't cold enough for that. "Ma'am." Her voice trembled. She reached out a hand. The woman finally turned, and Natalie's blood ran cold. The face was wrong, horribly wrong. The bones looked too symmetrical, the skin too smooth, the eyes too dark and deep-set, like looking into bottomless ink. It was a face designed by someone who only halfway understood what a human should look like. The woman's mouth opened slowly, unnaturally wide, as if unhinged from within, and a whisper escaped. Not from her throat, but from everywhere around Natalie at once. "You're early." Natalie stumbled backward. Early for what? she managed to whisper. The woods behind the woman shifted, just slightly, but enough for Natalie to notice. Shapes moved between the trees, tall, thin silhouettes weaving through the pines without sound. Not animals, too smooth, too synchronized. The woman's head tilted at a perfect 90-degree angle, eyes staring through Natalie instead of at her. "You came before the door was ready." Natalie backed toward her car, heart slamming against her ribs. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm leaving." The woman raised her hand, not fast, not threatening, just lifted it. But the air around Natalie thickened instantly, like invisible tar clung to her limbs. She couldn't move. She couldn't even turn her head. Her breath came out in short, broken gasps. Between the trees, the tall shapes edged closer. Their movements were unnervingly smooth, arms too long, legs bending just slightly wrong, heads swiveling with insect-like precision. Pale reflections shimmered across their skin, as if they were absorbing the headlights and returning them as faint pulses. The woman's voice layered suddenly, no longer one voice but many, all speaking from the same unmoving mouth. "The night you were meant to enter is not this one." Natalie's vision blurred. The car behind her looked impossibly far away, like the distance was stretching. Her legs buckled as the air pressure around her climbed, her ears popping, her bones vibrating painfully inside her skin. The shapes in the forest stepped forward in perfect unison. "Closer, closer." Natalie's voice cracked. "Please, I just want to go home." The woman stepped toward her, and the world seemed to dim as she moved, like her presence drained light from everything around her. She reached out and touched Natalie's forehead with one fingertip, cold, electric, paralyzing. The world flashed white. For a second, Natalie saw nothing but an endless corridor of darkness stretching in every direction, like she was suspended between realities. Then the whiteness collapsed inward, folding her vision through itself like bending glass. When she blinked, she was back on the road, but the car was gone, the forest was gone. The sky overhead wasn't a sky at all. It was a smooth, glowing surface pulsing with soft, rhythmic light, as if she were inside some colossal breathing structure. The night had changed around her. She hadn't walked into the wrong night. The night had walked into her, and everything went still. Megan Brooks had been driving since dawn, trying to put as much distance as possible between herself and the life she was running from. By the time the sun dipped below the Wyoming plains, she'd already crossed 2 state lines and emptied half her playlists just to stay awake. When her fuel light blinked on, she took the first exit she saw, a narrow, cracked road that led toward a forgotten gas station sitting alone in the open stretch of nowhere. The sign flickered weakly. Harper Fuel Co. It looked abandoned years ago, but the lights inside were on. Faint, yellow, trembling lights. In the middle of nowhere, that was good enough. She pulled in, gravel crunching under the tires, and stepped out into the cooling night. The air tasted strange, too metallic, almost like the air after a lightning strike, even though the sky was completely clear. Above her, the stars shone unusually bright, sharp enough to look artificial. Megan rubbed her arms uneasily and walked toward the shop door. As she reached for the handle, the door opened by itself. A soft chime rang from inside, but the tone was warped, too slow, as if the sound had been stretched. "Hello," Megan called, stepping inside. No answer. The place smelled like dust and stale air. Rows of empty shelves lined the walls. A faint humming came from the back, steady, rhythmic. She moved toward the counter, expecting to see a clerk, but no one was there. Instead, an old radio sat on the desk, glowing faintly even though it wasn't plugged in. The hum grew louder as she approached, vibrating through the floor. Megan frowned. "Is someone back there?" The humming stopped. The radio crackled. A voice slipped through, crisp and clear, like someone whispering directly into her ear. "Megan." She froze, every muscle in her body tightened. "Who said that?" she whispered. The radio spoke again, the same gentle tone, calm and familiar. "You're late." Her breath hitched. No one knew she was here. No one even knew she was traveling. She grabbed her keys, turning toward the exit, but the glass door was no longer visible. The entire front of the store had gone completely dark, a solid wall of shadow swallowing the windows. "What the?" She backed away, heart hammering. The radio flickered brighter. A soft glow pulsed from inside it like a heartbeat. "You drove past the point we marked for you." The voice continued. "We had to bring you inside." Megan shook her head violently. "No, no, I'm leaving." The humming returned, louder now, vibrating the shelves. Cans rattled. The lights overhead began to flicker in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. Something scraped across the far corner of the room, long, deliberate, like nails dragging across concrete. Megan spun toward the sound. There was someone standing there. A woman, same height, same build, same hair. For a second, Megan thought it was her own reflection, but the figure wasn't copying her movements. It tilted its head, studying her with an unsettling stillness. Its eyes were too dark, too deep, absorbing the flickering light instead of reflecting it. Megan stepped back. "Who are you?" The copy stepped forward, feet barely making a sound. Its voice was soft but layered, like two people speaking in perfect unison. "We are the ones who waited." Megan's breath caught in her throat. She backed against a shelf, gripping a metal bar with white-knuckled hands. "Get away from me." The lights died. Total darkness swallowed the station. Megan's heartbeat roared in her ears. She scrambled forward, hitting the counter, knocking the radio to the ground. The hum intensified, shaking the floor. She felt something brush her shoulder, cold, soft, like fingertips made of static. She gasped and ran blindly toward where she prayed the door still existed. Behind her, the layered voice whispered, "You belong where you were called." Suddenly the darkness shifted, not brightened, shifted. The blackness in front of her bent inward, stretched upward, forming a tall, thin shape. Two narrow points opened like eyes, glowing faintly with a cold, bluish light. The figure leaned down, impossibly close to her ear. "It's time." Megan screamed and pushed forward, but instead of hitting the door, she fell through a wall of cold air. Her body flipped, weightless, tumbling in absolute silence. She saw flashes, tall structures made of light, shapes moving with insect-like precision, a corridor of endless white. Then everything went still. The next moment she found herself standing in the middle of her car's headlights outside the gas station. Her engine was running. The door was open. The night was calm, completely normal. But the gas station behind her was dark, pitch black, as if no light had been on in years. The radio on her passenger seat crackled once. "You're not done." Megan slammed the door and sped into the night. She didn't see the figure that stepped out of the gas station behind her, the one with her exact face, watching her taillights shrink into the distance. Ava Delgado hated staying late at the architecture firm, especially on Fridays, especially when the whole building emptied out by 7 p.m. But a deadline was a deadline, and she knew if she didn't finish the revisions tonight, Monday would be a nightmare. By the time she packed her laptop, it was nearly 1 a.m. The 41-story office tower in downtown Seattle had gone from a buzzing hive of activity to a hollow, echoing shell. The only light on her floor came from the emergency bulbs, giving everything a washed-out, bluish tone that made the hallways feel like abandoned hospital corridors. She walked toward the elevator bank, heels clicking quietly on the polished floor. When she pressed the call button, only one elevator answered, a silver, metal-doored car she didn't recognize. It wasn't one her company used. The design was older, the panel scratched, the light above the door flickering like a dying star. Ava frowned. "We don't have an elevator, eh?" she muttered, staring at the letter glowing above the door. She'd worked here for 3 years. There were elevators B through F, all modern, all sleek. But this one looked like it belonged in a hotel built in the 70s. Still, she was exhausted. She just wanted to get to the lobby and go home. The door slid open with a long, slow groan. The inside was dim, illuminated only by a single ceiling lamp that buzzed weakly. The walls were lined with faded mirror panels, warped and slightly foggy, making her reflection look stretched. Ava hesitated, then stepped in. The doors closed immediately behind her, too fast, too forceful. She pressed the L button. Nothing happened. The elevator didn't move. It didn't even hum. She tapped the button again, harder. "Come on," she jabbed other buttons, 18, 10, 5, no response. The interior lights flickered suddenly, casting her reflection in jagged, broken shadows. The air felt heavier, as if the small cabin had grown smaller by a few inches. Then the panel changed. The digital numbers blinked twice. Then new text appeared. -1. Ava's stomach tightened. There was no negative floor. She reached for the emergency call button, but before her finger touched it, the elevator jerked violently, dropping fast, so fast her knees buckled. She grabbed the railing, heart slamming in her chest. The walls vibrated, the lights sputtered, but the elevator didn't fall downward. It moved sideways. A sideways motion no elevator should be capable of. No cables, no shafts, no physics. Ava's breath came out sharp and short. No, 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 this isn't possible. The cabin slowed gradually, then stopped with a soft click, like settling into place. The doors slid open. Ava stared. This wasn't the lobby. This wasn't anywhere in the building. The hallway outside was long, narrow, and lined with old industrial lighting that flickered in a slow pulse. The walls were metal, brushed, seamless, almost like the interior of a cargo bay. The floor was smooth, too smooth, reflecting the lights in a distorted pattern that made depth hard to judge. There were no signs, no exit arrows, just endless hallway. A cold draft brushed past her, carrying a faint, metallic smell, like ozone mixed with something older, something she couldn't identify. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She reached into the elevator, trying to press the button to close the doors. But the moment her hand touched the panel, the lights inside the car shut off completely. Pitch black. The only remaining light came from the hallway. The door stayed open, waiting. Something shifted at the far end of the corridor. Not a sound, just a subtle distortion of the air, like heat waves rising from asphalt. Ava held her breath. A shape slowly emerged, tall, narrow. Its movement was fluid but not entirely human, too smooth, too precise, like it was moving in frames slightly out of sync with reality. Ava. Her blood froze. The voice didn't echo from the hallway, it came from everywhere. From inside her skull. She stumbled backward into the elevator, hitting the back wall, but the car didn't feel like metal anymore. It felt warm, like something was breathing behind it. The figure glided closer. Not walking. Gliding. Its limbs elongated as it approached, stretching unnaturally, its shadow bending at impossible angles across the floor. Ava's breath broke into short gasps. She frantically slapped the elevator buttons, every single one, but none lit up. None worked. The figure reached the doorway. It didn't enter. It just leaned forward, head tilting at an unnatural angle as it examined her with eyes she couldn't quite see. Just two dark, humming voids where eyes should have been. "You took the wrong elevator," the voice whispered again, layered now, like a chorus of whispers brushing against her spine. Ava choked out. "Please, please just let me go." The figure tilted its head the other direction. "You were not meant to descend yet." The hallway lights flickered violently. For a split second, Ava saw multiple versions of the figure, tall, short, thin, wide, like her mind couldn't decide which shape was real. Then they all snapped back into one. The doors slammed shut. The elevator jerked violently upward, throwing her to the ground. It shot up faster than any cable system should allow. Her ears popped, her vision blurred. The cabin hummed with a deep, resonant vibration, then silence. The doors opened. She was back on her office floor. Her bag was on her shoulder, her laptop still in her hand, everything exactly as it had been. Except the elevator she stepped out of didn't exist, just a blank wall. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished metal panel where the doors should have been. But it wasn't her eyes looking back. They were too dark, too still. And when she blinked, her reflection did not. Ava dropped her laptop and ran. Emily Harrow had driven through the California coastline 1,000 times, but never this late, never this tired, and never through fog this unnaturally thick. It rolled across Highway 1 like a living blanket, swallowing everything beyond 15 feet. Her high beams didn't help. They only illuminated the swirling white river ahead of her, making the world look like an endless, colorless void. She slowed the car to a crawl, gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly. Her phone had no signal. The radio only gave static, and the GPS kept rerouting the same single phrase. Recalculating, like it was stuck in a loop. Emily exhaled shakily. Okay, Em, just get to the next turnout. Don't panic. The fog thickened further, so dense it looked like it was pressed against the windshield. She wiped her palms on her jeans, trying to steady her breath. The ocean should have been to her right, the cliffside to her left, but she couldn't see an inch of it. The world felt erased. Then she saw the figure, a faint silhouette barely visible through the fog, standing on the shoulder of the highway. Emily's heart jumped into her throat. She slammed the brakes, tires skidding slightly on the damp asphalt. The shape stayed still, completely still, not even swaying with the wind. Emily rolled down her window an inch. "Hello, are you okay?" The figure didn't answer. The fog thinned just enough for her headlights to outline the person. It was a woman, barefoot, wearing a pale blue hospital gown that fluttered as if underwater. Long, dark hair hung limp over her shoulders. Her skin seemed too smooth in the light, reflecting back a slight iridescent shimmer. Emily swallowed hard. Everything about the woman was wrong, not frightening, just wrong. Like someone had sculpted the idea of a human but didn't quite understand the details. She stepped out of the car slowly, leaving the engine running. "Hey, do you need help?" she asked, voice trembling more than she wanted. The woman turned. Not naturally, her entire body rotated at once, a stiff, pivoting motion. Her eyes were wide, but not with fear. They were too open, too round, glossy like black glass. She stared at Emily with an expression that didn't move. Emily took a small step back. "Okay, I'm going to call someone, just stay right here." She reached for her phone, no service. The woman took a single step toward her, silent, weightless, like her feet didn't touch the ground at all. Emily froze. I didn't mean to scare you," she whispered. The woman tilted her head sharply, as if analyzing the sound of her voice. Then in one smooth, perfectly calm tone, she spoke. "You weren't supposed to see me yet." Emily's breath hitched. "What does that mean?" The woman stepped closer. Her hospital gown swayed in slow, unnatural motion like it was caught in invisible water currents. The fog around them vibrated slightly, shimmering like static. "Your path wasn't aligned," the woman said softly, "but you crossed into it." Emily backed up toward her car. "I'm going to just go, okay? Whatever's happening, I'm leaving." But the woman shook her head slowly. "No, you've arrived." The fog behind her twisted, pulling away from the highway like curtains parting. Emily watched in disbelief as shapes began forming inside the mist, tall, thin silhouettes stepping forward in synchronized silence. Their outlines wavered as if reality was struggling to pin them down. Their eyes, dozens of pairs, glowed faintly through the fog, reflecting the headlights like wet obsidian. Emily stumbled backward, gripping her car door. "No, no, stay away from me." The woman's voice suddenly layered, her words multiplied, echoing with dozens of hidden voices beneath her single tone. "You weren't supposed to see us yet, but now you must return with us." Emily dove into her car and slammed the door shut. Her hands shook as she jammed the key into ignition and floored the gas. The wheels screeched. The car lunged forward. The fog swallowed everything. She drove blind, desperate, heart pounding so hard it blurred her vision. She didn't care where she was going, she only needed distance. But a sudden impact slammed the car sideways as if something massive had struck it from the left. Emily screamed. The whole vehicle skidded across the asphalt, spinning violently. White light consumed the windshield. For a moment she saw them, those tall silhouettes, circling her car in perfect symmetry, their faces expressionless, their limbs impossibly long, reaching toward her through the fog. Then everything went dark. She woke up at dawn. Her car was parked neatly beside a diner 20 miles up the highway. A trucker knocked on her window, asking if she was okay. Her phone had full signal. The fog was gone. The world was normal again. Except, when Emily looked in her rearview mirror, she saw the hospital gown woman standing in the distance on the side of the road. Her mouth didn't move, but her voice echoed inside Emily's mind with absolute clarity. "We'll finish the alignment soon." And then the woman vanished into thin air. Claire Morgan wasn't the type to sleep deeply. Years of living alone in a small townhouse outside Denver had taught her to wake at the slightest creak. the faintest shift in the air. But that morning she didn't wake to a sound, she woke to silence. A heavy, suffocating silence so absolute that the absence of noise felt like pressure around her skull. Her eyes opened slowly. The ceiling above her wasn't hers. The pattern in the paint was unfamiliar, smooth, too perfect, like it had been printed rather than painted by hand. She sat up quickly. This wasn't her room. The bed beneath her was bigger, softer, and the sheets smelled faintly of metal instead of laundry detergent. The air was colder than it should have been. The window across the room was too tall, too narrow, and framed by curtains she'd never seen before, thin, translucent fabric that shimmered faintly as if lit from behind. Claire's pulse surged. "Hello," she called out, her voice cracking. "Is someone here?" No answer. She climbed out of bed, bare feet hitting a floor that felt warm. Not like heated hardwood, warm like a body was beneath it. She recoiled instinctively, then forced herself forward. Everything in the room mirrored a house, but nothing felt like it belonged to one. The lamp on the nightstand had no cord. The dresser drawers had no handles. The mirror on the wall reflected her perfectly, but the edges of the frame seemed to drift, like the border wasn't fixed in place. She stepped into the hallway. It was exactly the kind of hallway you'd see in any suburban home, except the walls were flawless, without texture, without imperfections, as though the idea of a hallway had been sketched and then printed into existence. Claire walked slowly, heart pounding, every step cautious. The silence pressed closer. "Is anyone here?" She tried again. A soft creaking noise responded from downstairs. Claire froze. It wasn't the sound of a floorboard or a settling house. It was rhythmic, like breathing, slow, deep breaths echoing through a hollow space. She backed up toward the doorway, but the moment she turned, the hallway behind her shifted. It wasn't subtle. It physically changed. The layout stretched, elongated by several feet in an instant. The door she had come from drifted farther away, sliding along the wall without sound, as if the house were adjusting itself around her. Claire felt a wave of dizziness. "This isn't real, this isn't real." Another creak came from downstairs, closer now, heavier, like something was making its way toward her with deliberate patience. Claire scanned the hallway desperately for an exit, but the front door she expected to see at the end of the stairway wasn't there. Instead, the stairs descended into a wide-open room filled with fog, thick, rolling fog that looked alive. She backed toward the nearest door and pushed it open. A bathroom, almost normal until she looked into the mirror again. Her reflection stared back at her, but the face was wrong. Her mouth moved too slowly. Her eyes blinked out of rhythm. A split second later, her reflection smiled on its own. Claire's breath shook. She turned away from the mirror in horror, clamping a hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. Another breathy creak echoed from below. Deeper. Closer. She dashed back into the hallway and pressed herself against the wall, listening. The breathing now filled the entire house, long, deliberate inhales and exhales, like the structure itself was alive and aware of her. Then she heard footsteps, soft at first, then heavier, not human footsteps. They were too slow, too synchronized, too measured, like someone imitating the idea of walking. Then, just as suddenly, the footsteps stopped. Claire watched in dread as a shadow formed at the bottom of the stairs. It stretched upward, tall and skeletal, then thickened into something vaguely human-shaped. But the shape didn't remain stable. It shifted in quiet, glitch-like pulses, like someone continually redrawing its outline. The shadow spoke, not out loud, but directly into her mind in a smooth, cold whisper that slid between her thoughts like oil. "You woke up early." Claire pressed her back into the wall. "Where am I?" The shadow tilted its head. "In the place built for you." I've never been here." "You have, just not entirely." The fog below rose higher, swirling around the figure like a living tide. Claire turned and ran. She sprinted down the hallway, but the hallway began shifting as she moved, the walls stretching, the ceiling lowering, the floor softening beneath her feet. She stumbled, crashed into a wall, and looked over her shoulder. The shadow was gliding up the stairs. Not walking, gliding, its limbs unfolded unnaturally, like joints bending in directions they shouldn't. Claire pushed herself up and ran into a room at random, But the room was empty, featureless, just smooth walls and a single window showing a sky with no sun, no clouds, just a pale, glowing expanse. The house vibrated with a low, sub-bass hum. Claire felt it in her teeth. The shadow appeared in the doorway. "You cannot leave until you're finished." "Finished with what?" she cried. The shadow stepped inside, filling the room with its cold, impossible presence. The walls folded inward, the window dissolved into light, and the air grew thick with a warm static that made her skin prickle. The voice flowed through her one last time, with remembering. The world went white. Claire woke up screaming in her own bed. Same room, same sheets, same morning light, but the warmth beneath the floor, it was still there. And when she checked the hallway mirror, her reflection blinked a half-second too late. Rachel McConnell had always loved the quiet of her small cabin in northern Montana. No neighbors, no traffic, just the wind in the pines and the distant rush of the river. She bought the place to escape the chaos of the city, to finally breathe without the world pressing in on her. But even from the first night, the cabin had never been completely silent. There were always little noises, creaks, taps, soft shifting sounds in the rafters. She told herself it was the wood settling, the wildlife, the wind. She convinced herself to stop noticing. Tonight, though, she couldn't ignore it. The footsteps had started just after midnight, slow, heavy, deliberate steps walking across the roof. Not scurrying animal steps, not soft rustling. Actual footsteps, space between each one, weight behind each one, a pattern that felt almost human. Rachel sat up in bed, heart racing, listening. The footfalls moved from one end of the cabin to the other with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly where they were going. She grabbed her phone, no service. The screen flickered once, then died. A power surge ran through the floorboards. The lamp beside her buzzed, then went dark. Complete silence followed. Then a second set of footsteps joined the first. Heavier. Slower. Rachel held her breath. Something was up there. She slipped out of bed as quietly as she could. Grabbing the heavy flashlight from her nightstand, she clicked it on. The beam wavered, flickered, then steadied. She crept toward the front door, every instinct screaming at her not to go outside, not to look, not to confirm what her ears already knew. But staying inside felt worse, like she was being watched. The footsteps stopped, directly above her. Rachel froze. Her breath turned cold in her lungs. She backed away from the door. The ceiling groaned under the weight of something shifting its stance. Then a deep, dragging sound, like fingers trailing across the shingles, scraped the air. She clenched her jaw to keep from crying out. The dragging stopped. A soft, rhythmic tapping began. Tap, 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 like a signal, like a pattern. Rachel whispered, "Please go away." Something exhaled above her. Long, heavy, wet, not wind, not animal, something that knew she was below it. She stumbled backward into the living room. The fireplace embers were still glowing faintly, casting the room in a dim orange haze. Shadows clung too tightly to the corners, too dark for the amount of light present. Rachel raised her flashlight and aimed it at the ceiling. The tapping stopped. Silence swallowed the room. Then the roof shifted, wood bending as though something was climbing down toward the walls. Rachel felt the cabin tilt. Impossible but unmistakable, like the structure itself was reacting to the weight above. A sudden knock, sharp, aggressive, hit the front door. Rachel screamed and dropped the flashlight. It clattered across the wood floor, flickering wildly. She grabbed it again with shaking hands and aimed it at the door. The knocking came again, louder this time, the wood trembling under the impact. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks, pause, 1 knock, like a code. "Who's there?" Rachel cried, tears filling her eyes. The voice that answered didn't come from the door. It came from behind her, from inside the cabin. "It's open." Rachel spun around. Standing in the hallway was a woman, her height, her build, her hair. Rachel's exact face, her exact body, her exact expression, except the eyes were wrong. Too black, too wide, too hungry. The copy tilted her head with eerie curiosity, as though observing Rachel's panic was the purpose of its existence. Behind the copy, the hallway walls subtly warped, bending inward like the cabin was breathing. Rachel backed away, whispering, "No, no, no, no." The copy stepped forward, bare feet silent on the wooden floor. The roof groaned loudly, something else crawling, dragging, shifting just above Rachel's head. The cabin lights flickered in a slow pulse. The fire sputtered. Rachel pressed herself against the window, desperate for an escape, but the glass reflected something horrifying. Two dark, elongated silhouettes clinging to the roof outside, their limbs bending at impossible angles, faces pressed against the glass from the other side but leaving no fog, no breath, no trace. Inside the cabin, the copy smiled. "You heard us," it whispered, voice layered with echoes. Rachel shook violently. "Why are you doing this?" The copy stepped close enough for Rachel to feel the cold radiating from its skin. "Because you listened," it whispered. "You always listened." The roof cracked loudly. Something was coming down. The copy reached out a hand, and Rachel felt her body pull forward without touching it, gravity shifting, the room tilting toward the creature's will. Rachel screamed as the ceiling split open above her, revealing the dark, multi-jointed shapes descending with slow, deliberate hunger. The air turned thick, electric, vibrating with low-frequency hums that shook her bones. The copy leaned close to her ear, whispering one last message as the world around them dissolved into blinding white. "You're part of the house now." When Rachel blinked again, she was standing outside her cabin at dawn. Her car was parked neatly. Birds chirped. The world was peaceful, too peaceful. But when she approached the cabin door, she noticed something carved deep into the wood grain, fresh, jagged letters. "We are still on the roof." Hannah Pierce had lived in her quiet Wyoming farmhouse for 6 peaceful years. She liked the isolation, the space, the silence. Nights were dark enough to see every star, mornings calm enough to hear the grass shift in the wind. On most evenings, she sat on her back porch with a cup of tea, watching the horizon slowly swallow the sun. Nothing strange ever happened out here. That was the whole point of moving. But on this particular night, something felt wrong the moment she stepped outside. The sky wasn't dark. Not because it was cloudy, there were no clouds at all. The darkness felt thin, as if it wasn't night but the faint impression of night painted onto something deeper. The stars didn't twinkle. They pulsed. Slow, deliberate pulses like faint heartbeats across the sky. Hannah wrapped her sweater tightly around her shoulders and stepped off the porch, the wooden boards creaking under her feet. The air was colder than it should have been, cold enough to sting the back of her throat. She looked up again, trying to shake the uneasy feeling rising inside her chest. One star pulsed brighter than the rest. Too bright, almost like a spotlight. She blinked hard. "No, that's stupid," she muttered, rubbing her eyes. But the star grew larger, not brighter, larger. It expanded slowly, a white glow spreading outward in a perfect circle, widening as if the sky were stretching around it. Hannah took a step back, gripping her porch railing. The air hummed softly, a vibration so low she felt it more than heard it. Her mug slipped from her hand and shattered on the wooden steps. The glowing circle opened, not like clouds parting, more like the sky tearing from the inside. Hannah gasped, stumbling backward. Through the widening rift she could see a light, soft, sterile, impossibly bright. The edges of the tear rippled as if made of liquid glass. The hum intensified, vibrating her bones. A voice whispered behind her ear, not from a person, not from the sky, from inside her mind. "You're awake early." Hannah spun around, heart hammering. No one was there, just her empty backyard, the fence, the dark outline of her barn. The grass swayed slightly as a cold draft passed through, but no wind touched her skin. She backed toward the porch, eyes fixed on the expanding hole in the sky. The light inside shifted, deepening, swirling, forming shapes she couldn't decipher. Something moved inside the brightness. Something tall. She whispered, barely audible, "No, no, this isn't real." But the whisper answered her, gentle and layered. "You were called long before you arrived here." The tear widened further until it stretched across half the sky. The stars around it flickered and vanished one by one, swallowed by the growing light. The sky itself seemed to peel back, revealing a world beneath it, one of blinding white corridors and impossible shapes. Something began descending from the rift. It wasn't a craft. It wasn't even a shape she recognized at first. Just a silhouette, long, narrow, gliding downward like a shadow painted on the light. As it came closer, its edges sharpened and bent, forming a tall, symmetrical figure with limbs too smooth, too jointless, too deliberate. Its skin reflected the glow around it like polished metal. Hannah stumbled backward, hitting the porch railing. Her breath caught in her throat. The air hummed louder, vibrating through her teeth, through her ribs. The figure descended silently, landing on her lawn without disturbing a single blade of grass. It did not walk toward her, it drifted. The moment it reached the porch steps, the humming ceased completely. Absolute silence swallowed the world. Then the figure spoke, not with a mouth, but with a voice spilling directly into her thoughts, smooth and cold. "You remember us?" Hannah shook her head violently. Tears streamed down her face. "I don't know you. I don't. Please, please go away." The figure tilted its head in perfect calculation. "You do know. The remembering has not finished yet." Hannah's body locked in place as if held by unseen hands. Her chest tightened, breath shallow. The figure raised one elongated arm, placing a single finger against Hannah's forehead. A shock of warmth flooded her skull, warmth that wasn't painful but deeply, deeply invasive. Images burst behind her eyes. A corridor of white, rows of identical figures, a soundless room where her own voice didn't work, a beam of light pouring down from a ceiling she couldn't see, a hand reaching toward her as she floated, a phrase echoing over and over, "We will return when the cycle begins again." Hannah screamed, collapsing to her knees as the figure removed its hand. The hum returned, louder, deeper, echoing through the entire landscape. The sky's tear pulsed violently as if reacting. The voice inside her mind whispered one last time, "The cycle begins now." The figure drifted backward, rising effortlessly into the widening rift. The tear sealed behind it like an eyelid closing. The sky returned to normal. The hum vanished. Hannah lay shaking on her porch as the wind gently rustled the trees. The stars twinkled innocently above her. But when she lifted her shaking hand to her forehead, she felt a faint warmth, and in the reflection of her porch window, her eyes pulsed with a faint white light. Just once. Erin Cooper had lived in her Boston apartment for 5 years, and in all that time she had grown used to the old building's quirks, the pipes that clanged in winter, the radiators that hissed like angry cats, the wooden floorboards that groaned under the slightest weight. But that night, just past 2 a.m., she heard a sound the building had never made before. It wasn't pipes. It wasn't the radiator. It wasn't a neighbor. It was footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming from inside the wall directly behind her bed. She sat up instantly, pulse spiking. The footsteps continued, 1, 2, 3, steady, unhurried, too measured to be rodents, too heavy to be pipes contracting. Erin held her breath. The sound paused, then shifted direction, sliding along the wall toward her closet. She stood from the bed, heart pounding so hard it felt like it shook the room, and pressed her ear to the drywall. Silence. Then right against her ear something tapped back. A single sharp tap. Erin staggered away from the wall. No, absolutely not. She grabbed her phone, but the screen refused to turn on. She flicked the light switch. Nothing. The entire apartment was dead and quiet, too quiet. The city outside should have been audible, passing cars, distant trains, night traffic, but the world had gone mute. Then the footsteps started again, this time inside the ceiling, crawling, dragging, moving. Erin backed into the living room, hands shaking. The ceiling above her rippled, not as if something was walking on it, more like something inside it was testing the boundaries. A soft voice echoed from the wall behind her. "Erin, come closer." Her throat closed in panic. "Who's there? We've waited so long to speak with you." The drywall bulged outward, forming the outline of a face pressing from the other side. Lips, nose, and hollow eye sockets emerged in the paint, stretching the surface like skin pulled too tight. Erin stumbled backward over the coffee table. The mouth in the wall moved again, but the voice wasn't coming from the shape, it came from everywhere. "You hear us now, so you must let us through." Cracks formed around the face, spiderwebbing across the surface. Dust rained onto the floor. The footsteps above intensified until the entire ceiling vibrated with pressure. Erin ran toward the front door, but when she touched the handle, it turned ice cold, freezing her palm in place. She screamed and yanked her hand free. Behind her, the wall split open, not like drywall breaking, more like paper tearing. A long, thin hand reached out, fingers too many, each moving independently. The face in the wall dissolved, replaced by a hollow opening filled with a shimmering, pulsating darkness. Erin bolted for the window and threw it open, but instead of the street below, she saw a long corridor of pale light extending endlessly downward. Not outside, not Boston, somewhere else entirely. The voice whispered again, calm, patient, certain. "Come through, Erin, you were promised to us." Hands, multiple hands, emerged from the ceiling, gripping the edges, pulling something massive toward the opening. Erin screamed as the drywall behind her exploded in a shower of dust. The last thing she saw before she was enveloped in light was her apartment stretching like elastic, the walls elongating, the floor folding, the ceiling yawning open like the throat of some living structure. Then she was gone. The apartment returned to silence, and the footsteps finally stopped. Mallory Pierce finished her shift at the Chicago Trauma Center long after midnight. She was too exhausted to think, her scrub stiff with dry disinfectant, her hair pulled into a sloppy bun she barely remembered tying. When she stepped into the hospital's deserted staff restroom, she was grateful for even a moment of quiet. She splashed cold water on her face, exhaling slowly. But when she looked up, her reflection didn't match her movement. Her breath caught in her lungs. She blinked hard. Maybe she was overtired, maybe her vision was lagging. She waved a hand slowly. Her reflection waved back, a half-second late. Mallory's heartbeat accelerated. Okay, you need sleep." She forced a laugh, but then her reflection smiled. She didn't. She froze. Her reflection tilted its head left while she stood perfectly still. The smile widened, stretching unnaturally like the skin was being pulled from inside. Mallory stumbled backward. Her reflection's smile snapped away instantly, replaced by a flat, hollow stare. Then it leaned forward. Not Mallory. Her reflection leaned forward on its own, pressing its hands against the inside of the mirror. The glass bowed outward, bending like a thin sheet of plastic. Mallory bolted for the door, but it slammed shut before she reached it. The fluorescent lights above flickered violently, casting the room in a stuttering rhythm of light and darkness. The air grew colder, until her breath formed white clouds. Her reflection opened its mouth. A long, slow, too wide opening. Silent scream. A soft voice filled the room, a whisper made of layered tones. "You finally looked long enough." Mallory shook her head. "Stay away from me, stay away." Her reflection pressed harder, distorting the glass further. Cracks spidered from the center, but instead of shattering outward, the cracks pulled inward as if the mirror were being sucked into another dimension. The lights went out completely. In absolute darkness, Mallory heard the soft tapping of fingers against glass, then scratching, then the unmistakable sound of something sliding through a narrow opening. A cold hand brushed her shoulder. She screamed and swung her arm wildly. Something grabbed her wrist, firm, smooth, inhumanly cold. When the lights blinked back on, even for a split second, she saw it. Her reflection was standing behind her, not in the mirror, in the room. Its eyes were empty spheres of black. Its smile was slow and wrong. It leaned close to her ear, whispering with a voice made of echoes, "We've learned you. Now you come with us." Mallory tried to run, but the floor stretched like rubber, pulling her backward. The walls folded inward, compressing the room into a tunnel of twisting reflections. Dozens of versions of Mallory stared at her from every surface, some crying, some expressionless, some whispering silently. Her own reflection, the first one, stepped forward and placed its hand on her chest. The world shattered like glass. Mallory's scream echoed down an endless corridor of mirrors. She never walked out of the restroom. But every morning after, nurses swore they saw her reflection lingering in the sink mirror, watching them a little too closely, smiling a moment too late. Jenna Lowe lived in a quiet Tennessee suburb where nothing strange ever happened. Her street was lined with identical houses, identical mailboxes, identical porch lights. Safe, predictable. But one night, just after 3:03 a.m., She woke to the sound of someone knocking at her front door, 3 slow, deliberate knocks. She sat up in bed, groggy and confused. No one would visit at this hour. She checked her phone, no alerts, no missed calls. The knocking came again, each knock perfectly spaced. She slipped out of bed, padded through the dark hallway and approached the door. "Hello, who is it?" She whispered through the wood. Silence. She checked the peephole. Nothing. The porch was empty. She exhaled shakily and turned away, but the knocking resumed, closer, louder. This time it was coming from the back door. Jenna's blood ran cold. She crept through the kitchen and peered through the glass. Again nothing, just her quiet backyard, the swing set swaying gently though there was no wind. Then knocking again at the front door. Jenna whipped around. What is happening? The knocking moved around the house. Front door, bedroom window, back door, bathroom wall. Always 3 perfectly timed knocks. She grabbed her phone to call 911, but the screen flashed white, then went dead. All the lights in the house flickered off. Jenna pressed her back to the wall, breathing hard. Then from the other side of her living room wall, a voice whispered, "Jenna, open the door." Her throat tightened. The voice wasn't familiar. It sounded like a recording played backward. She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. "No, leave me alone." The knocking resumed, now faster, frantic, tapping from every surface at once. Walls, floors, ceiling. The sound vibrated through her bones. Jenna dropped to her knees, covering her ears. Then everything stopped. Absolute silence. Jenna lowered her hands slowly. A soft creak echoed from the hallway. She turned. Her front door was open. Wide open. Cold night air drifted into her home. She stepped forward cautiously, reaching for the doorknob to close it, but before she could touch it, a hand closed around her wrist. A hand reaching down from above the doorway. Long, pale fingers wrapped around her skin. A voice descended from the ceiling, whispering, "You answered." Jenna screamed as she was yanked upward into the darkness above her door frame. Her feet left the floor. The doorway stretched unnaturally tall as she was pulled into the tight, impossible space. The ceiling folded open like a living mouth. In her final moment before disappearing completely, she saw her own front door slowly closing itself. Click. Silence returned to the street. No one saw Jenna Lowe again, but neighbors say that sometimes around 3:03 a.m., 3 slow knocks echo across the houses, and every door that hears it unlocks on its own. Whatever you saw tonight, it wasn't the end. It was only the first signal, and they're already closer than you think. If you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe and keep your lights on tonight.